Welcome to the FWOT Show on the Coil Entertainment Network, the Happy Hour Network, VillageConnectionRadio.com, iTunes, the Google Play Store, and wherever you happen to have found this podcast. It's everywhere, because it's fun. I'm your host, Rob Steele. That's Jesus Jones in the background, and this is the show that lets you know that it's not just you. The world has actually gone to shit. Have you looked around lately? Nowhere is safe anymore, especially if you want to travel. You heard the stories over the past couple weeks about United Airlines and how they've thrown passengers off planes. Well, apparently American Airlines took that as a challenge. Hold my beer. Watch this. Not the way you want to do it. But, yes, Flight 591 from San Francisco. An American Airlines attendant decided that a woman and her newborn child didn't need to be on the plane anymore. So they decided to forcibly remove her, yanking a stroller out of her hand, and, whether this is on purpose or not, struck her in the face with it. When one of the other passengers decided, that's just the wrong thing to do, and tried to stand up to the attendant who was throwing the woman off the plane, the attendant threatened him back. The resolution to this particular issue was the woman, the child, and the man who was completely unrelated to this incident, other than standing up for someone because it's the right thing to do, they were thrown off the plane. The attendant still flew. Does this sound like a good idea to you? Because it sounds absolutely horrid to me. But it does remind me that this episode is brought to you by United Airlines. United Airlines, because when we beat our customers, we just use our hands. Actually, something I wanted to do was I wanted to run a commercial for trains because I think trains are very cool. So I made up this commercial, and I'm going to run it anyway. When I wanted to travel the country, I decided on taking the train. That way, we wouldn't just see the destinations. We'd see the journey, the fields, the mountains, the forests. Some people think train travel is long and boring, but with beautiful views and a leisurely travel schedule, it's a much better alternative to airplanes. It's also inexpensive and more environmentally friendly. Side effects include relaxation, a lack of unpleasant ear popping or traffic delays, and exposure to new places and people. However, do not stand on the tracks if you are allergic to being run over by a train. So for this year's vacation, remember trains. They can be fun. Unfortunately, it's not going to work as well as I would have liked it to. I'm going to have to advise against train travel this summer, mainly because Trump signed an executive order that pretty much killed off any federal funding for railway travel in the United States. Thanks, Don. Way to go. Really, you know what? Bite me. But that travel issue leads to another thing that came up this week in regards to Donnie's travel ban. It actually comes as a quote from Attorney General Jeff, I'm an absolute moron, Sessions. Sessions said he was amazed that a federal judge in Hawaii had the ability to block the Trump administration's travel ban. Here's a quote from Sessions. I am really amazed that a judge sitting on an island in the Pacific can issue an order that stops the President of the United States from what appears to be clearly his statutory and constitutional power. Really? You're amazed a federal judge couldn't do that? By the way, did you not know that Hawaii is also what's the word I'm looking for? It's a state. It's been a state for 58 years. You should have caught on to that by now. And technically, it's an archipelago. Okay, fine, screw it. It's an island. I'll give you that. It's still a state. And by the way, since you're seeming to have a lot of geographic issues this week coming out of the Trump administration, South Korea has never been part of China. That came from Trump this week. And South Korea went, hang on a minute, what? No, sorry, we're not. But speaking of the potential forthcoming war with North Korea, if we ever get that aircraft carrier turned around, House Veterans Affairs Committee Chairman Paul Rowe, who's, here's a shock, a Republican from Tennessee, who should know better, drafted legislation to deduct $2,400 from our soldiers' paychecks so they can have the rights to access their GI Bill benefits. Because that's the way they do it. We're going to give you this, but it's going to cost you money, and we're going to take it whether you want it or not. No, I don't think that's the way it should work. These are soldiers. They're on the front line of wars. I think you should give them pretty much whatever the hell they want. And now to the food section of our show. Yeah, I know, we've never had a food section before, but food has popped up a few times this week. For example, we had a little bitty issue with Mexico this week. It had to do with tuna and how Mexican companies are selling tuna in the States. But the United States insists that the tuna must be dolphin safe, meaning that no dolphins were killed in the catching of the tuna. Screw the tuna itself, we're worried about these dolphins. And Mexico has said, you know what? That's what we do. The U.S. government said, no, Mexico doesn't do that. They kill dolphins too, man. That's why we're building a wall. Which has nothing to do with tuna, but anyway. U.S. officials went to the World Trade Organization and said, we want to impose sanctions on them. And the World Trade Organization went, no. Actually, the World Trade Organization not only ruled in Mexico's favor, they're allowing Mexico to impose trade sanctions worth $163 million a year against the U.S. All because somebody thought somebody was doing something, and they weren't. Because you don't have the time to look shit up. It's a lot easier these days. There's this thing called Google. Use it. But, you know, that's not the only issue the U.S. government is having right now. There are all the trips that our president is taking to play golf several states away from where he lives because, what, he's got that kind of time? But Rob, Donald Trump is just playing golf. Oh, really? Well, one, you bitched and moaned when Obama did it on a considerably less frequent basis. And two, because this is the food section of the show, the Food and Drug Administration have recalled 2 brands of frozen hash browns, Harris Teeter and Roundies, because they found bits and pieces of golf ball in several containers of hash browns. How did the golf balls get in the hash browns, Rob? Well, it turns out that one of the main places they get their potatoes is adjacent to a golf course, and the golf balls went off course and into the potatoes. And then they went into the potatoes again. See? Potato in too. Or something like that. I'm sure there will be a golf term to come out of it. But speaking of Trump and food, our geographically impaired leader had a problem with Canada, who has made a new ultra-filtered milk that's high in protein. And it's being sold across some of the border states that border Canada. Donald Trump tweeted, because talking would be beneath him, I guess, Canada has made business for our dairy farmers in Wisconsin and other border states very difficult. We will not stand for this. Don, Wisconsin is not a border state. It just isn't. It borders a lake, and the other side of that lake is Canada, but it's not really a border state because it has no border with Canada. Perhaps you should familiarize yourself with the map of the country you're supposedly in charge of. Or would that be too much trouble? Of course, there's also a new poll out about approval ratings, and Donald Trump is at a fairly anemic 39%. But wait, there's someone worse. That would be Vice President Mike Pence, who is at 38%. Wonderful. And how do they get this way? Well, they're doing things like signing executive orders, like the one they tried to sign last week that would block funding from sanctuary cities. Now, sanctuary cities are cities in the United States that help immigrants. Don't immediately kick them out. They help them the way they're supposed to, the way this country was founded, that kind of an idea. Well, Donald Trump signed an executive order, and a federal judge, granted, I don't know where this one came from. I've heard rumors it came from San Francisco, which is a sanctuary city, blocked the executive order so they can still have the money they need to run the city, which is a good thing. But then again, there was this thing that was said about the executive orders themselves this week concerning Donald Trump. Donald Trump doesn't actually read the executive orders before he signs them. This has been reported on by a number of people out of the White House. And frankly, if that doesn't scare you, it should. Now, the FWOT Show has obtained exclusive footage of Donald Trump and Mike Pence encountering a new executive order for the first time. Give this a listen.
Words. Yep. Uh-huh.
But that's not all. Included in this, Fox News, also sometimes referred to as the Republican News Channel, one of their hosts, Shepard Smith, who is one of the most uptight conservative Republicans on the planet, said concerning Donald Trump and the whole Russian investigation, I think there's something to it. Fox News just turned on the Republican White House. Mark the date, people. Hopefully the end is coming soon. Now a bit of financial news, and it concerns the minimum wage. Now, some people don't think that the minimum wage needs to be raised any, but I want to point out a couple things to you, because there was a chart that was released this week that actually shows how many hours a person has to work in each particular state to afford not a house or a Lamborghini, but a very simple 2-bedroom apartment. That's not too much, is it, for someone on minimum wage? Well, let's look at some of the states. If you live in, let's say, Georgia, where I live, unfortunately, you have to work at minimum wage 76 hours a week in order to afford that. In Virginia, you have to work 105 hours a week. Utah, 73. California, 89. New York, 101 hours a week in order to afford a 2-bedroom apartment. Are you sure that this minimum wage thing doesn't need to be raised? Because some people need a place to live. I'm just saying. You remember that guy I mentioned last week, Frank Artilles, for the Republican from Miami, who liked to use the N-word? Yeah, he resigned about 10 minutes after this show came out last week, which is a good thing. He's gone now. Or is he? Because he may be brought up on charges, because it turns out that not only did he like to use the N-word, but records show that some of his PAC money was used to pay for consultants like Heather Thomas and Brittany Singletary. Heather Thomas is a Hooters model. Brittany Singletary is a former Playboy model. Consultants on what? But it's not all bad news coming out of our government this week. Maryland became the first state to mitigate any Planned Parenthood cuts. That is some good news, because that is a brilliant idea, because, hey, women need health care too. Who knew? Certainly no one at Fox, because earlier this week, on the heels of Bill O'Reilly being let go for sexual harassment purposes, it turns out Sean Hannity had a sexual harassment charge leveled against him, but it's just one. He'll live through this. And frankly, I read the charge, and as much as I don't care for Hannity, I'm not sure it was sexual harassment. I'll give it that it was a hideous pickup line, where basically he met one of his future guests at a book signing he was doing, and repeatedly asked the guest to come back up to his hotel room. Yeah, you know what? If you say it once, it's a bad pickup line. If you continue it, then you go, not the best idea. Now, eventually, his accuser, and I love this term, walked back the claim. Yeah, whatever. You know what? That kind of thing needs to stop. Now, you do say it once, and that's fine, but you keep it up, then it becomes sexual harassment. And if you have a problem with me saying it the one time is okay, just think of it this way. If you don't get the opportunity to do it nicely and politely the first time, no one's ever going to go out with anyone. Ever. Because just asking someone out can be considered sexual harassment these days. That's going a bit far. So don't do it that way. Strange and bizarre news from the world of Frankenstein. I'm sorry, not Frankenstein. Sports. I meant sports. Some of you have heard or even remember about former New England Patriot tight end Aaron Hernandez, who was convicted of murdering someone a few years ago. You remember that? This past week, he committed suicide, which is sad. Even for someone who's in jail for murder, it's still a sad thing. The weird part of this story comes from researchers at Boston University who have managed to acquire Aaron Hernandez's brain so they can examine it for concussion issues that all football players seem to have. His family has said, no, we want his brain back, give it back. So there is now an argument over the custody of Aaron Hernandez's brain. I suppose it could be worse though. Elvis's brain is still being held on the planet of Zort, so be happy it's still on the planet. But it's not all bad news around the planet. Today, Mario Kart 8 is being released for the Nintendo Switch, the new Nintendo system. It's a lot of fun. It looks like it's going to be a great game. But as consumer advice, I'm going to ask you to do this. Avoid going to Target. Target is actually a good store. I don't have a problem with it normally. But as a promotional idea, to promote Mario Kart 8, which is a racing game where it's just fine to knock people off the track and throw things at them like turtle shells, which make them fly off the road for some reason. It's a fun game. Anyway, over 650 Target stores have decided to deck out some of their shopping carts in the same way carts in Mario Kart the game are decked out, which sounds cute, and it's a good promotional idea. But can you not see people running around the store throwing things at each other and trying to knock each other out of the aisles? Could be a cute promotional thing. Could be a complete disaster. Tune in next week, we may find out. But since I'm speaking of businesses, I want to get a second opinion on this because I don't entirely understand how this worked. I looked up a company recently on the Better Business Bureau website because they said they have a spectacular rating. And they do. The company is called Moni, which is a home security system company. That's not the part I have a problem with. They have, on the Better Business Bureau website, an A+ rating, which sounds really good until you look into it a little bit and you see something called the Consumer Review Rating. Now, 92 customers had reviewed this company at the time of my recording this. 13 gave positive reviews, 3 gave neutral reviews, 76 of the 92 reviews were negative. 83% bad. 83%, that's still a B, isn't it? So they're bad, got a B, but they still have an overall rating of A+. If someone can explain this to me, drop me a note at rob@thefwotshow.com. You know what? That's good if you have comments on anything that was in this show today. You can also go to the website, thefwotshow.com, and find the buttons for Facebook and Twitter and all the other social media things. Contact me there as well. And while you're at it, don't forget to subscribe to the show on iTunes or the Google Play Store. Guess what? Buttons on the website. How hard is that? I try to make things so easy for everybody. But as you heard in the rest of the show, they don't want easy anymore. They want stupid. So until next week, I would have appreciated if you would be safe, because it's gotten really weird out there.